Hey, how's it going? It's Donald from Coherent. Today we want to talk about how we can use the Coherent APIs to craft out a front end for us to use. From a previous video, we have created a home rater, which is a existing service on the Coherent platform. Now, if I want to go ahead and basically just utilize API, we can just go ahead and input various type of input and hit submit. And if I want to call the API, I just simply go ahead and go to this endpoint and provide the required information. Now, what if we want to craft out a front end for Coherent Spark? And what kind of options do we have? What kind of APIs do we call? Today, we're going to go ahead and introduce a tool that we internally use. Uh, it's a platform called Retool. Now, what we have here is a front end that is built on Retool. However, the back end, it's simply calling various type of inputs from Coherent Spark. Now, let's take a look at this. You might see there's a lot of very similar inputs that we have from the API inputs that we have on the API itself. We have year bill, territory, and it's all fairly filled in. And if I were to go ahead and let's say, complete every single field on the screen and hit rate on Coherent, what we'll see is it will hit our execute APIs and basically return as a result for us. Now, what's more interesting about this is how is this page being built? And the question often becomes, do I have to manually input every single field? For example, if I were to go ahead and say click to territory, you see that there are various type of territory selections right here. Now, natively speaking, from the uploading of the Excel file into the Coherent platform, we inherited these dropdown from the Excel file. So, namely speaking, if these fields are already created in the Excel, Coherent Spark would also go ahead and inherit that. Now, in order to achieve something like this, where I want this particular dropdown value to be dictated by Coherent Spark, all we have to do is within the applications, we just call something, we just call the validation API on our platform. Now, let's take a look at this. This is the backend of Retool. So this is where you would go ahead and basically create the applications. I'm not going to go into the details about create each individual text boxes. That's just simply a mechanism on that Retool that supports. But what we will focus here is I want to bring your attention to, let's say, this territory field right here. You see that when I click on this, there are various type of drop down that shows up. Now, this is made possible because we are using something called a validations API. Now, this validation API exists in our documentation. So let's take a look at this. Essentially, what the validation API does is you can use this to extract static and dynamic validations from the Spark service. So when you go ahead and basically call this particular API, it will go ahead and return a list of fields that is validated for the inputs. So you can actually see that if I go back to my home rater and just hit the preview button on the bottom right here, on the top, sorry, we can actually see that for this particular service, CA home rater validations, it would go ahead and basically return what are the valid values that we have for each individual input. Whole number, min-max value, and particularly speaking, in this case, if I'm looking at territory, it actually provides me the entire option list that I can include. So what I have done here is essentially within Retool itself, I was able to go ahead and basically map these two values together. We can actually see that I am calling the home cat default value, and I am basically returning this entire drop-down list from the API call that I have done over here. Now, of course, I have another API call which actually handle the execute, which is just mapping the value we have to what Coherent Spark is expecting. Hence, when I go ahead and click the execute button on page 2, it will go ahead and basically send the rating on Coherent. That's essentially how this entire application is created. Now, so the validation API is a very nifty way for us to bring in value from the Coherent Spark API. And once you have these set validations and these set fields, you can go ahead and basically set up your entire front end based off that. One very nifty thing about this as well is since the entire front end is dictated by the Excel file, the field here will also get updated as well, given that you have changed it from your Excel file. So in the future, if I also have a territory number 1 and 2, and I want to get an update on this field, all I have to do is update my Excel file, and this field would programmatically change as well, given that we are only calling the APIs from the default value inside of Coherent Spark. Using our validation API and the execute APIs, it really provides us an easy way to take a look at what values are available, and you do not have to build those values from scratch. Hope this helped, and see you next time.